This Day in Sports History. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. Sterling Soap is 100% natural and with a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne, there's a product and a scent for everybody. And I'm not just saying that. I'm an actual customer. I've been buying Sterling Soap for over a year now, sampling different products and scents along the way, and I have not come across a single scent that I don't like yet. Check them out for yourself at sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. It's another edition of This Day in Sports History. It is November 29th, and on this day throughout sports history, we had one shot count for 5, another kind of shot count for 3. While another guy took a shot at something new, that became a tradition that we all enjoy every year now. All that plus a non-sports fun fact at the end about Michelangelo you probably didn't know about. But let's start with what happened on this day in 1987. Golf's skins game returned yesterday after a 17-year hiatus. Now, if you missed it or you don't know what I'm talking about when I say the skins game, well, in essence, you got 4 golfers, each hole is a skin. If one of the 4 has a birdie and the other 3 make par or worse, well, the birdie wins the hole and the skin, which is worth X amount of dollars. If 2 golfers tie with the best score on a hole, then the skin carries over to the next hole until a golfer wins a hole outright. Back in the 80s, this was a pretty decent-sized event, and it drew some well-known guys. In fact, this was an all-star cast in this version in 1987. Lee Trevino won a bunch of skins with one amazing shot. In this skins match, you had Jack Nicklaus, you had Arnold Palmer, Fuzzy Zoeller, and Trevino. They were playing at the PGA West course in La Quinta, and when they came to the par 3 165-yard island green 17th, there were 5 skins on the line worth a total of $175,000. Trevino was first to hit, and here's the legendary voice of Vin Scully calling the action for NBC that day.
It is the dreaded Island Green, the 17th, and with all of the carryovers, it now is worth $175,000. If you have a good memory, Fuzzy Zoeller won $140 here with a 26-foot putt last year. Trevino has the honors since he won the skin at 12.
6 iron, right in line with the flag. Could be stiff.
That shot helped Trevino win the 1987 skins game with $340,000 worth of skins. On this day in 1980, the first collegiate three-point shot was made. The NBA had adopted the three-pointer to start the 1979 season, with Boston's Chris Ford hitting the first NBA three. Well, the NCAA was interested in adding this three-point shot, and they started looking around for leagues to experiment with it. The Southern Conference signed on to become the first league to incorporate the three-point arc on the court 22 feet from the basket. The Western Carolina Catamounts opened their home schedule on this night against Middle Tennessee State. Western Carolina's Ronnie Carr holds the distinction of hitting the very first three-pointer in NCAA history on this day back in 1980. Adoption of the three-pointer was a bit slow. A few more leagues signed on to test out the long-range bomb the next year, and by 1983, most leagues around the country were using a three-point arc with varying distances being tested. Not every coach liked the idea of the three, though. Indiana's Bobby Knight was one of the most outspoken about his dislike, saying the three-point shot should be used between the reptile and the lion's cages at the Lincoln Park Zoo. It's interesting that when he said that, his Hoosiers were leading the Big Ten in three-pointers made, with his sharpshooter Randy Whitman pulling the trigger on most of those. It would not be until 1986 that a standard distance of 19 feet 9 inches would be adopted for the three-point shot, and the collegiate distance is now 22 feet 1 3/4 inches. Well, since we're talking about college basketball, a lot of early season matchups fall into the cupcake category. Teams looking for the runt of the litter to pick on and snag an easy win. Well, on this day back in 1989, Oklahoma welcomed U.S. International University out of San Diego to Norman. It was the season opener for the Sooners, who had high hopes for the year, and they started the season ranked number 17 in the country. U.S. International was actually a Division I team that had played a couple of games so far and had beaten Drake out of the Missouri Valley Conference prior to this one. Well, the Sooners put on a show in the first half, putting an NCAA record 97 points on the scoreboard in the first half, and that still stands as the D1 versus D1 matchup record. The Gulls did not make a miraculous comeback in the second half. In fact, they barely covered Oklahoma's first half number. When the final horn sounded, Oklahoma wound up with the 173-101 win. The Sooners would go on to finish the regular season ranked as the number 1 team heading into the NCAA tournament before a second-round loss to North Carolina derailed their national championship dreams. U.S. International would add their name to the NCAA record book later in the year in a 186-150 loss to Loyola Marymount. Now, their 150 points is still the mark for most points scored by a losing team in a Division I versus Division I game. U.S. International changed its name to Alliant later in its history, but shuttered all of its athletic programs in 2006. You may have heard about this story a few days back on Thanksgiving Day, but in case you didn't, on this day in 1934, it was the first ever Thanksgiving Day game for the NFL and the Detroit Lions. George Richards was a radio executive who purchased the Portsmouth Spartans and moved the team to Detroit for the 1934 season. Major League Baseball was well established by this point. The NFL was still grappling a little bit with its identity. College football was way more popular, drew more people to the stands, and not every great college player went on to play pro after their career in college was done at this point. But Richards knew a few things about promotion, and one of his big ideas was to have his team play a game on Thanksgiving. Now, there was a concern about whether people would give up part of their Thanksgiving Day and come out to watch a football game, especially these new guys in town. Well, that question was answered pretty quickly. 26,000 tickets were sold more than 2 weeks in advance of the game, with many more wanting tickets to watch the team play against the champion Chicago Bears on this day. Estimates of fan interest said if the University of Detroit Stadium was big enough, another 25,000 tickets could have been sold. When the game rolled around, it did not hurt that this turned out to be a pretty darn good one, an instant classic. The Bears were a perfect 11-0 coming into this game. The Lions had lost just one. Detroit scored a couple of first-half touchdowns and added a field goal to take a 16-7 lead at the half. The Bears' defense tightened up in the second and got a couple of field goals in the third quarter to trim the lead to 3. When the Bears' Joe Zoeller picked off a Lions pass and returned it down to the 4-yard line, it set up the game-winning score. Bronco Nagurski found Bill Hewitt in the end zone for the game winner. The Bears won 19-16, and 4 days later, these same two teams played again, and the Bears won again, 10-7, to wrap up their second straight NFL championship. Another first from that day that helped make this an annual event was the presence of NBC Radio. Richards and NBC set up a 94-station network to broadcast the game across the country. It was the first time a football game was broadcast nationally. These two teams met on Thanksgiving Day the next year, with Detroit getting a little revenge in 1935. With the exception of the war years between 1939 and 1945, the Detroit Lions have played at home on Thanksgiving since this day in 1934. On this day in 1992, New York Jets defensive lineman Dennis Byrd was paralyzed during a game. It had already been a tough season for the Jets. They were 3-8 coming into this one against Kansas City. They lost defensive star Jeff Lageman in the first game of the year. Receiver Al Toon suffered his 9th concussion in his 8-year career and retired. The Chiefs were leading 6-0 in the third quarter. They had the football, and on a second down play, Chiefs quarterback Dave Craig was looking downfield, but the pocket was closing in. Dennis Byrd from the right, Scott Mesereau from the left. Craig sensed the pressure like a veteran QB would and stepped up in the pocket. Byrd got a hand in and stripped the ball away, and then crashed headfirst into the sternum of Mesereau. The Chiefs recovered the loose ball, guys diving in with little consideration for their body to claim possession of it. Back at the point of the strip, Byrd lay on his back, looking up at the New Jersey sky. Linebacker Kyle Clifton looked down at him and said, "Get up, Dennis." Byrd replied, "I don't think I can, Kyle. I think I'm paralyzed." It wasn't known at the time, but it would become evident later on at Lenox Hill Hospital that he'd shattered his fifth cervical vertebra into hundreds of pieces. In the immediate aftermath, the only part of his body below the neck he could move was his right bicep. The prognosis was not good. After a 4-hour surgery to stabilize his neck and stop the swelling, he was told he would be a quadriplegic for the remainder of his life. But Byrd never gave up hope. He kept his faith and his determination, and just 3 months later, he took his first steps. He continued to rehab the injury to the point he could walk without assistance. And then, on opening day of the 1993 season, he walked to midfield with his wife and kids for the coin toss. His sheer will and determination, along with his spirit, became an inspiration to not only his Jets teammates, but also to anyone who suffered a spinal cord injury. He received the inaugural Most Inspirational Athlete Trophy in 1993 that became an annual award for the Jets. He co-authored his autobiography titled Rise and Walk, The Trial and Triumph of Dennis Byrd. That was turned into a made-for-television movie, Rise and Walk, the Dennis Byrd story, that debuted in 1994. Sadly, Byrd was killed in a car accident in 2016 in Oklahoma at the age of 50. And on this day in 1972, the video game Pong was released. Now, compared to games today, heck, compared to games back in the 90s, Pong was a bit basic. Graphically, it was a rectangle on each end that you moved up and down with a paddle controller to hit a square ball, if a ball can be square, with the idea to try to hit it past your opponent's rectangle like you would if you were playing a real-life game of ping pong or tennis. It was the first commercially successful video game, and it was extraordinarily popular. You could find it in arcades, and it was soon made available for home play with a console connected to the UHF connectors on your TV. There are those who point to a 1958 video game called Tennis for Two, which was played on an oscilloscope, as the true original, but it wasn't something that was commercially successful or really available. If Pong had not been as popular as it turned out to be, who knows if Atari, PlayStation, or Xbox would exist, or even how different things may have been. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Back in 1503, Michelangelo hid from the Pope inside the walls of the Medici Chapel. The Pope was taking harsh measures against the artist's fellow Florentines, and he thought that he was on the Pope's death list. He spent 3 months inside the chapel, doodling on the walls until it was safe to emerge, and he and the Pope were cool again. The passage where Michelangelo hung out and doodled is occasionally opened up for tourists. And that, my friend, is 731 consecutive days, 2 full years of this day in sports history. I started this podcast on November 30th, 2023, with the hope that I can make it through the entire year, not miss a day. I put a lot of time and effort into bringing you a little sports history each and every day for the past 2 years, and I hope you've enjoyed the journey with me. So, here I am after 2 full circles, and I'm not really sure what's next. I'll try to keep it going for as long as I can. I may take some time off here and there to catch up on my research and get ahead of this thing, or episodes may be a little spotty, but, anyway. Thanks for going on this journey with me, and I'll try to be back with another This Day in Sports History tomorrow. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.